Hello everyone and welcome to the Kiki London YouTube channel. My name is Amanda and in today's video we are going to be doing a autumn ombre using the Kiki London rubber colour base with some gel polish as well. So I really hope you all enjoy watching. Starting off, I have got my own nails. I've just removed the previous set that I did, so I'm going to go in and cleanse with a little bit of acetone, just to make sure that the nails are sanitized before we go in and do any prep work. Now I don't have loads of prep to do because obviously I've been doing my nails pretty much every week for the last couple of weeks, but we are going to go in and just make sure that there is no skin or cuticle growing up the nail plate. So I'm going to start off by going in with the Helsinki cuticle tool and using the flat end to begin with, just because I love how easily this scrapes off any excess cuticle that has started to grow up the nail plate. So I'm just going in, pushing everything back with this and scraping off any of that excess cuticle. And if you have any stubborn areas or if you want to come round the curves of the cuticle and up the sidewall, it's great to switch around with this tool and use the rectangular end on it as well. If you haven't already checked out the K&S Professional Nail Tools, I would highly recommend it. They have made prep so much easier for me, and like I said, because I've been doing my nails regular and I've been prepping regular with these tools, my cuticles have been so much easier to manage. So I'm going in first of all with this step. You can see here what I mean by if you've got any little stubborn bits, you can get rid of it there. Anything that's too stubborn, it is actually a lot easier to come in with the Milan cuticle nippers and nip that off. So here I just had like a stubborn little kind of hangnail. It was really dried, so I'm coming in and just clipping that off. It was really difficult because I didn't want to remove too much of the living tissue around the edge. I was just literally trying to get that dead bit of skin. Then I'm going to finally come in with the Sophia cuticle tool and push everything back so we're exposing as much of that nail bed as possible. And I love this tool because it's double-ended, so the smaller end is great for smaller nail beds and then the larger end is obviously great for larger nail beds. So you're really easily able to get it nice and flat up against that cuticle and push all of that tissue that you don't want to remove, so all of that living tissue, you're able to push that back out of the way. And then it will also scrape off any cuticle that has been missed with your previous tool, or if you're not going in as thorough with the Helsinki scraper, you're going for a little bit more of a gentle prep, then this just pushes everything off the nail bed. So it's a great all-round tool. I'm then going to come in and just remove any of that cuticle that we've moved by taking a little spray, a little pump of alcohol on to my dust brush, which is also from Kiki London. Then I'm going to come in and just fix up the shape. Now again, because I've only done my nails I think last week's video, I don't have too much work to do when it comes to shaping, so I'm just bringing back the crispness to the nails, and I'm using the 180 grit side of the file to do this. Of course, this is where you would come in and either shorten the nails or shape them depending on the shape that you or your client want. I'm just keeping with the shape that's already there, which is kind of an ever so slightly tapered square. So I'm just bringing in those side walls slightly and just coming straight across the top of the nail. I'm really pleased with how well my nails have been growing. This is I do keep them quite short, so I know you're probably thinking, but they're not that long, but they've been growing really healthily, and a lot of the damage that I had on them has grown out now. So as we can see, we've now got them shaped. I'm ready to come in and gently etch the nail plate just to simply remove the shine, and I'm going to use the Kiki London buffer for this. So I'm just very gently tickling that nail plate with the buffer, so I'm not applying hardly any pressure. And you don't want to repeatedly go in the same direction with your buffer either. You want to kind of come in all directions. I like to go round as well, and I like to use the end of the buffer to go right up to that cuticle area, just to make sure that you are fully removing all of the shine from that natural nail plate, so you're going to get really good adhesion when it comes to applying your base coat. Now for this set here, I am actually using the 100 grit side of the buffer, but you can also use the 180. If you are using the 100 grit side, just make sure you are being very careful. You don't want to over buff the nail plate. This is also when I'm going to start pulling all that skin back as well. So sometimes you might find that you see a little bit of prep that you've missed doing. So you'll see that I come in with those cuticle nippers as there was just a little bit of dead skin that I wanted to remove. So I always keep my tools at hand until I'm completely finished all of my prep. And then I'm going to come in and just cleanse away any of that dust that's been caused from buffing the nails. And I'm also using alcohol here to dehydrate the nail plate before we move on to our primer. And then we are going to move on to priming the nails using the Kiki London primer. So this again is going to give you a really good adhesion because it's going to make sure that your natural nails are all primed and ready for your gel products, which of course you're going to start off with your base coat. Talking of base coat, we're going to be using one of the new rubber color bases today. So here we have RB16, which is a gorgeous milky shade. It's got an ever so slight hint of pink to it, but I really wanted to kind of go for a hidden milky ombre look. So we're going to be using this. Of course, I'm going to have my trusty stripe liner brush to hand for application. So I'm going to start off by applying a really thin coat of this as our base coat before we come in and do any ombre design. So I'm starting off by taking a really small amount onto my brush, working it into that natural nail plate, and then I like to switch up to the stripe liner brush and use this to nudge that product slightly closer to the cuticle area and along those side walls as well. It can sometimes be a little bit tricky to get your application perfect, but if you have the stripe liner brush, it makes it a lot easier. So you can see here, as I'm fanning out that brush, it's not going to go right down into the curve of my cuticle, and everyone's cuticle shape and nail bed shape is different. So with different clients, you might find it easier, and with some clients it can be harder. Personally, for my own nails, I've just always found it easier to come in with the bottle brush, get fairly close to the cuticle with the bottle brush, and you can do this by moving the brush onto its side, but then just coming in with the stripe liner brush and pushing that product up closer. I find this way I can get really close without touching the skin or cuticles. And of course you don't want to touch the skin or cuticles because you don't want to be overexposing the skin to gel products, but also because then it's going to prevent any lifting as that nail grows out. If you're applying your gel onto the skin, as the nail starts growing, that gel that's connected to the skin is gonna have like an area where it's not connected to anything because the nail's grown and that gel is no longer on the skin, and then this is going to cause the product to lift. So you want to make sure your application is as neat as possible, and in all honesty, it's just so much easier to do that with the stripe liner brush. So we're going to pop that in to cure for 30 seconds. And then I'm also going to be using the ombre brush today to create an ombre, but I am going to do it slightly different because I wanted to have a play around with doing a darker ombre with a lighter shade, which is not something I do too often. But here I've got the gorgeous Hazel Night, which is an absolute must have for autumn. It's a really gorgeous coppery brown, and it just has an absolute stunning look to it. So I'm just going to do one now to begin with to see how this goes, how the blend goes, how hard it's going to be. And this is exactly how I would do nails as well if I was working on a client or practicing maybe a technique or a look that I haven't done before. I haven't blended any of the new rubber base shades before, and sometimes certain colours can be trickier than others, and I know that a dark to light ombre is something that I've always struggled with. So I'll come in and I'll do it on one nail first of all, and then when I've worked out the technique, then I'll go in and do all of the Hazel Night on the rest of the nails, and then the second step of the ombre. I hope that makes sense. But I'm starting off by putting Hazel Night down at the tip of the nail and then taking my ombre brush and blending that back. You want to make sure there's no harsh line, and I'm only going to be doing one coat of Hazel Night as well because I want this ombre, I don't want it to pop too much. I want it to look quite hidden and milky. As you see there, I did also come in with the angled nail art brush and clean up the cuticle area. Sorry, not the cuticle area, the side walls where that had touched, where I was a little bit too heavy-handed with my ombre brush. But you can see here that's blended in nicely to the base coat that we popped down. I'm then going to come back in with that same base And I'm going to start off by wriggling a ball of gel down at that cuticle area, nudging it up into place, and then just floating this on. I'm not applying it too thickly, but I do want to build a little bit of structure for this set as well. I want there to be like a nice natural apex. So I'm taking this ball of gel, getting it as close to the cuticle as possible, and then taking it from side to side. I'm then going to come in with my stripe liner brush and get that nice neat cuticle line, get it a little bit closer and thin it out as well around that sidewall area. It's great doing this when you are building up a little bit of structure with the rubber base, because you don't actually want that thickness right at the cuticle. Then I'm going to swap to that ombre brush and see how well this is going to blend over the Hazel Night. Obviously it's quite a pigmented shade. Both these shades are quite pigmented, but they're on opposite scales of the colour. You know, one's very dark, one's very light. So I'm just playing around, seeing how it's going to blend, whether I'm going to need 1 or 2 coats. I did feel as though 2 coats would look better, so I did decide we'll keep this thin. I won't add any more product just yet. We'll just go in with the 1 coat and then come along and do the 2nd coat after. But here I'm just pulling it down, feathering it out. You do need to use a really light technique with this, especially where the rubber base coat is slightly thicker than a regular gel polish, so you don't want to have a too heavy hand or you'll pull too much of it down. And then it's blended quite nicely over the Hazel Night. I do want it to look a little bit more hidden and milky, so I'm glad that I decided to come in with that 2nd coat. So I popped that into cure, and now I'm going to do the remainder of the nails how I would normally do this technique. So I would do the Hazel Night on all of the nails, cure that, and then come in and do my ombre effect with the rubber base coat. So as you can see, I'm applying the Hazel Night right to the tip of the nail, and then I'm starting to pull it back. I pull back a little bit of it vertically, so I pull it down, and then I start going side to side, up and down, and just until I'm happy with how it's blended, using the very tip of the ombre brush to feather out that colour. So it already creates its own ombre in a way, so it's blended in nicely. And you want to do this because you don't want a harsh line where the Hazel Night ends. For example, if you just come in and did the Hazel Night and left it like this, you would see that harsh line when you come through and do your 2nd coat. It'd look really blocky. It wouldn't look like a nice seamless soft blend. So just taking the time to blend that in makes a big difference. And because the rubber colour bases have a nice, after they've cured, they have a tacky inhibition layer, and because that's quite a nice tacky inhibition layer, it really grabs onto the colour, so you feel as though you've got something to blend it into, if that makes sense. Now, I always find my little nail tricky to do. For a long time I avoided doing any kind of nail art on my little finger because it's just so small to work on. But with your brushes, once you learn how to use them, you can make it a little bit easier. It becomes doable. So you'll see here, I'm starting off, first of all, I'm struggling a little bit to blend that in, and I did apply a little bit too much of the Hazel Night. So what I do is I switch from blending it back with the ombre brush to using the stripe liner brush, just because you're going to be able to create the same effect. It's going to take a little bit longer because you've only got 1 bristle rather than several. Obviously there's several bristles, but you know what I mean. But you're able to blend it back with that stripe liner brush. So once I blended all of those in, I did do the thumbnail off camera as well. I popped that in secure for 30 seconds, and then we're going to come in and do the 2nd part. So again, taking a ball of gel, rolling it off my brush using a circular motion, and then taking it from side to side so that we build up just a small amount of structure. And then I'm just taking that stripe liner brush and nudging that closer to the cuticle, getting a nice neat cuticle line, and pulling it down ever so slightly at the sidewall, cleaning up if necessary using the angled nail art brush and a little bit of alcohol. And then I'm going to switch to the ombre brush, just pulling down the very top of that gel. So you only want to start pulling a little bit, and then you're going to be able to control it a lot better. If you pull loads down, it's going to be a lot harder to control. And then you just want to really gently feather this out. And whilst you're working on the next nail, you're going to leave this one wet. It's going to soften whilst it's going to start self-leveling. So the product's going to start self-leveling, and then that ombre is actually going to soften a little bit as well. So I just come in, I haven't cured anything yet, and then I'm going to start working on the next nail. Obviously being very careful, especially when you're working on yourself, that you don't smudge that previous nail. This technique obviously is a little bit easier if you're working on a client. If you don't feel comfortable, if you do feel as though you're going to smudge that nail, you can pop it in to cure, but do just give it a few seconds to self-level, because then any of the brush strokes that you've put in with the ombre brush will blend out as well. I always find it easier to come in first of all and neaten up the cuticle area and then come in and do my ombre, but if you prefer, you can do it the other way around. I just feel as though once I've got my gel down, I like to make sure I've got a nice neat cuticle line. As well with this look, because you're going to be coming in and doing a second coat with the RB16, it is a little bit of a trust the process look. Like an ombre never looks perfect in my opinion on that first coat. So if you are doing it on a client and they are looking a little bit like, oh, I'm not sure, just tell them they've got to trust the process, and once you come in and do that second coat, it looks a lot better. So here again with my little finger, I just popped that gel down in the center, and I'm actually going to do a lot of the work with the stripe liner brush, so we're nudging it up into place similar, but I'm kind of building the apex a little bit with the stripe liner brush rather than with the bottle brush, just because you've got such a small nail bed there to work on. It's always handy to have the angled nail art brush to hand as well for cleanup. I love where it's got that sharp slant to it. You can really get down into the cuticles nicely. So again, just pulling that gel down using a nice light stroke. If you do accidentally pull down a lot more gel than you want to, you can wipe off some of the excess using a little bit of alcohol on a nail art brush as well. Again, I would use the angled nail art brush. So we then cured that all for 30 seconds, and that's what the first coat is looking like. I wanted that ombre to look a little bit more hidden, milky and softer, so I'm going to come in and repeat that step again, trying to use only a small amount of gel because we don't want these nails to end up too thick. But I do love, like obviously you could do this look with gel polish, but I do love the strength that I get from the rubber base coat, so that's why I'm opting to do this with it this way. So again, coming in, I'm not taking as much rubber base on my nail on the second coat, but I'm still trying to blend down the same amount so we get that really hidden look with the ombre. Now at this point, if you didn't want to create the hidden look, you wanted the hazelnut to pop a little bit more, you could come in and add a tiny bit more of that to the tip of the nail, just a very small amount on the tip, blend it back, and then come in and do your second coat of rubber base. Would have made the hazelnut pop a little bit more, but like I said, I wasn't looking for that particular look in today's video. I wanted it to look quite soft and milky. And this particular shade is an absolute essential for any kind of milky look. Of course, there are two whites, so there's actually three whites already available in the rubber base range. One is quite an opaque white, one is a more milky white, and one is a milky white with a sparkle. So of course, if you wanted a more whiter milky look, you could go for that one, but I do love the hint of pink to this one. I think it looks really, really beautiful for autumn as well, because I do feel as though whites tend to be more popular during winter and spring, just because they look a lot more crisp and fresh, where this color teamed with the hazelnut really gave off a soft, cozy vibe. And a lot of the time when I do an ombre, I like to pop something over the top of it, whether it be crystals or some stamping. So that was what I had in mind for this video, for some stamping. So we are going to come in over the top and pop on just a tiny bit of stamping, because I don't want to cover up too much of that ombre, but I do want to just add a little something extra to the nail. So here you can see with this technique, I'm trying to take my time. You don't want to rush too much, you don't want to work too fast with the rubber base coat. It's very similar to when you're working with a builder gel. If you work too fast, you end up putting bubbles in it, or you end up pulling it around more than you want it to. Now, when it comes to doing an ombre, you can play and play and play around with it. And sometimes you can play around with it a little bit too much. You can kind of go in too much and be a little bit too try hard to get that perfect ombre, when all it really needs is to be left for a few seconds to self-level and blend out itself. So I'm trying my hardest to get this as neat as I want it, but then I am going to leave it a few seconds. It self-levels, and then I found that I was a little bit more happier with how the overall look turned out. So coming in again on that little finger, trying as hard as I can not to touch the skin or cuticles, and I actually applied a little bit more here than what I wanted to, so I was kind of having to work it around the nail a little bit. And then I start pulling it down, and it does come down a little bit more opaque than I want it to, where I have got a little bit more gel there. So this is where you could come in with a little bit of alcohol and remove that. Now, a lot of the time when I do a look like this with builder gel, if I feel as though I'm not 100% happy with how the overall feel is, so a lot of the time when builder gel is that bit thicker, I will come in and buff the nail or even file the nail to get that nice smooth appearance so that everything's nice and even. I don't tend to feel like I have to do that as much with the rubber base coat because it's a little bit of a thinner consistency to the builder gel. It self levels a lot faster, so I just find that I don't end up having to do any refining. So for this video, once we have cured the ombre, I'm ready to come in and do my stamping and top coat. Of course, you could come in and refine if you wanted to with a buffer, but you would have to be really careful that you don't buff into the hazelnut. So that's why I just paid a little bit more attention to making sure that I was happy with the application, so that I wouldn't have to do any refining. But like I said, I don't feel as though I ever have to when I'm using the rubber base, and that is because of the consistency. So lastly, we're going to come on and stamp on some little leaves. So I've applied a generous amount of stamping polish to my stamper. We're keeping it really simple and just doing a single colour gold leaf on each nail, but this gold teamed beautifully with the hazelnut. So again, going to clean up my stamping plate, apply a generous amount of stamping polish to the image, scrape off the excess. I try to scrape in 2 directions, as I do feel lately this gives me a really good pickup on detailed images. I like to use my lint roller to remove any excess. Now I do have a few little spots of gold there that have transferred onto the nail, and I will remove them with a little bit of alcohol and my angled nail art brush. But we're just going to finish off flying through, adding some stamping to all of the nails. Now I was going to do these with a matte top coat, but because I added in the gold and because the hazelnut has that ever so slight hint of shimmer that you can still see through the milky effect of the ombre, I decided to go in and do these with a glossy top coat. But I do feel as though they would look really gorgeous matte, and it's been a while since I've had a matte set on myself. So if there are any matte nail designs you would like to see, do drop them in the comments below. I'm really loving the shorter look on my nails and still being able to play around and do nail art on shorter nails. For a long time it took me a while to get a hang of doing nail art on short nails because it's actually a lot easier on longer nails. So if you have any short nail art looks that you would like to see, like I said, pop them in the comments below and I'll be happy to give them a go. On the thumbnail, I did decide to come in with a slightly larger leaf because obviously you're working on a bit more of a wider space. But then once the stamping was all finished, oh no, lastly, really quickly, I'm going to go in with my angled nail art brush and just clean up any little specks of gold that you want to get rid of. And then lastly, we're going to come in and top coat, and I'm top coating today using the crystal top coat. Here is also where if you did feel as though your application was a little bit uneven with your rubber base coat, you could actually come in with the rubber top coat and float it on, and that would give you a more smoother finish if you did have any lumps, and ever so slight lumps or bumps I'm talking. But you could apply it by floating it on and then holding the nail upside down, because sometimes when you're doing an ombre, especially where you're using a gel polish and then a rubber base coat, you might find that the tips are a little bit thinner than the cuticle area, but I like that look, you know, where it tapers down anyway. But once we had a finished top coating, of course we need to come in and cuticle oil our nails. So I'm going to take the fresh rose cuticle oil and just apply a little drop of this to all of the nails, and this is going to nourish and replenish those cuticles. I absolutely love the smell of this one. It does make me feel a little bit summery, which is kind of nice as we head into autumn, but it's a really beautiful fresh scent. And then because we're heading into autumn and your skin can sometimes get a bit drier as the months get a bit colder, I'm going to start making sure that I'm using the K&S hand cream as well. So whilst I've still got a generous amount of that cuticle oil on the skin, I like to come in and rub the hand cream in, and that really locks it in and you end up with super soft skin and cuticles. And then just look at the shine of the crystal top coat. I absolutely love it. So I really loved how this set turned out. I hope you all enjoyed the video. If you did, please do give it a thumbs up, leave us a comment below and hit that subscription button if you haven't already. As always, all of the products I've used will be listed in the description box below. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. Lots of love. Take care. Bye bye.